The doors of the courtroom, heavy and made of wood, creaked open, and all heads swiveled. In walked Diddy, his orange jumpsuit shining cruelly under the glare. The gravity of the moment weighed on his shoulders as the shuffle of feet in shackles rang like a countdown. With each clink of metal against tile, the silence was struck by unbearable tension. Flashes burst from the press cameras, locking his face in moments of light, but he didn't blink. He couldn't. His eyes scanned the room. Familiar faces met his, some with brittle hope, others hard with certainty. The air reeked with the scent of old wood and stale coffee, reminding all that justice here moved slow, deliberate, and merciless. Whispers spread as he approached the defense table. Opposite him, the prosecution remained still as statues, their files piled high, their eyes fixed intently upon him like hunters who knew the prey could not flee. Over them all towered the judge's bench, the gavel resting like a sword, awaiting. The blow. Diddy breathed out slowly, drumming his fingers on the table in time, anything to conceal the shake in his hands. At the front of the room, his mother gripped a silver cross so tightly her knuckles were white. She mouthed something. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps a warning, but the anxiety swallowed it up. Journalists had their fingers above keyboards, ready for history to unfold. Even the bailiff's unflickering gaze appeared to foretell an ending no one could halt. The jury did not look at Diddy, their faces inscrutable. A pen fell off a desk and dropped to the floor. The noise shattered the hush like a shot. Nobody budged, and then the prosecutor stood up, faced, unmoving, composed. He buttoned his coat, moved forward, and with nothing but one sheet of paper to hold, he sliced through the room like a knife. "Your Honor," he snapped. "Excuses are over." Each word fell like a hammer. He reminded the jury that this had nothing to do with celebrity or fame. It had to do with the law, with what occurred when someone felt they were above it. His voice created visions of shattered trust, of nights that couldn't be reversed, of lives that would never again belong to the people who had lived them. The gallery stirred. Reporters clacked frantically away. A siren moaned outside, a plaintive reminder that the world kept turning even as Diddy's world stopped. And when he was done, silence sat in the room. Before the defense attorney stood up, smoothing his suit like armor. He spoke with authority at first, then compelling urgency. He reminded the jury of Diddy's power, the communities raised up, the charities given to. He depicted him as not criminal, but a tarnished man trapped in opportunism and misunderstanding. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared firmly, "this is not merely about Sean Combs. This is about whether we still hold a man innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt." Hope flared, but it was weak. Then everyone looked at the judge. He remained motionless, expressionless, his hand inches from the gavel. The air was filled with silence until even the buzzing of the lights seemed oppressive. Slowly, he leaned forward. His voice was loaded, slicing through the room with precision. "This court has received arguments, examined evidence, and heard testimony," he said. "What is before me is not a man. It is a decision between responsibility and conceit, between respect and disrespect for the law." Diddy's jaw locked. Sweat beaded at his hairline. Each flick of the judge's eye was a verdict in itself. "You have built an empire," the judge went on. "But with great power, there is great temptation to think that the rules don't apply, and in the eyes of this court, you have fallen." The gallery gasped. His mother's lips moved in prayer. Diddy's throat constricted as the judge's hand clasped around the gavel. At last, the silence broke. "Sean Combs, this court sentences you to 17 years in state prison." The room exploded. Gasps, whispers, the ring of a dropped phone. Cameras blazed. In succession, Diddy stared, frozen, blinking, as if the words had not penetrated. His lawyer grasped his arm firmly, whispering, but nothing could cut through the haze in his brain. The bailiff advanced. The sound of metal clinking filled the air. Diddy glanced back at his mother for a final time, her face smeared with tears, cross still held in shaking hands. Her lips mouthed two words, "Stay strong." He attempted to nod, but his throat burned. His chest hurt. His world ended. The gavel struck. Court adjourned. The guard stood him up, chains weighing on his wrists. The creak of the chair sounded like a final flash of cameras. He glanced around the courtroom, the benches, the jury box, the elevated bench. Chairs now, remnants of memory. The doors creaked open. Harsh fluorescent light poured through. Courtroom. Noises gave way to silence, drowned out by the cold reverberations of metal and concrete doors slamming shut. Each step took him further from the man the world had known, and farther toward just another number in the system. Deep inside, a flicker of defiance glowed. But the heavy weight of 17 years extinguished it. Everything else was the sound of heavy doors slamming, shuttering off the life he knew. The fluorescent corridor seemed to go on forever, the jingling of chains at each step. 2 guards flanked Diddy, their boots pounding the concrete floor in a cadence that sounded like a funeral march. Behind him, the heavy court doors clanged shut with a metallic sound, blocking off the world he had known. The muffled shouts of reporters and spectators grew faint until all that was heard was silence, except for the occasional distant thud of other steel doors. The smell came next. Bleach, sweat, concrete. It was the smell of captivity, the type, which informed you freedom wasn't just behind you, it was gone. As they walked through the straight, Diddy attempted to calm his breathing. His throat was parched, his chest constricted. Each step rang like a countdown to a new existence. They took a turn and moved into processing. A desk filled the center of the room, stacked with papers, fingerprint ink, and a pile of orange uniforms just like the one he was wearing. A correctional officer sat in wait, his face impassive, as if Diddy was just another name on another document. Fame did not apply here. Take off his cuffs, the officer instructed matter-of-factly. The guard removed the cold steel, and as soon as its weight was lifted from his wrists, a different kind of weight bore down more relentlessly, an intangible chain he knew he'd bear for years. He rubbed the red marks on his hands, but relief was short-lived. Stand there. The officer gestured toward the camera mounted on the wall. The flash came like a bolt of lightning. The picture wasn't for headlines anymore. It was for the system. Mugshot. Indelible. A mark on his name nobody could remove. Fingerprinting followed. The black ink soiled his fingertips, each press onto paper another reminder that Sean Combs's life was now state property. When it was finished, a guard pushed a folder across the desk. Within, his number. No longer a name, just figures that would accompany him wherever he went. As they led him further, the corridors darkened, chilled. A voice in the distance yelled, laughter, and then silence. The noise echoed strangely here, as if ghosts careening from wall to wall. At last, they stood before a steel-barred door. The guard pressed a button. Buzz! The lock released. The door groaned open. This is it, one of them grumbled. The door thudded shut after him, a heavy vibration that reverberated through his chest. He was in the machine, and for the first time in his life, Diddy came to understand this wasn't merely 17 years, this was surviving. The cell door clanged shut behind him with a metallic clang that seemed to vibrate through his skeleton. The noise was not only loud, it was definitive. Baba. Room was cramped. Too cramped. Blank walls painted a ghastly off-white. A metal bunk secured to the wall. A thin mattress that seemed older than the passage of time itself. A toilet in a corner with no door, its stainless steel scratched with names and numbers that told stories he didn't care to hear. The reek of sweat and disinfectant mingled in the air, thick and stagnant. Diddy perched on the side of the bed, his hands clenched into fists on his knees, his thoughts racing faster than at any time in years. Beyond the bars, the din of prison life drifted through. Shouts, laughter, curses, the clanging beat of footsteps. Somewhere along the block, someone pounded on their door, the sound a drumbeat of resistance. But here, in this cell, he was alone. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, breathing hard. His chest still felt heavy with the echo of the judge's voice. 17 years. 17. The number replayed in his head like a broken record. Not months, not even a handful of years. 17. A stretch of time so long it felt unreal. He gazed at the tiny barred window above the bed. A strip of night. Sky showed through, bordered by iron. Somewhere in the world outside, the world continued without him. The clubs, the studios, the blinding lights of a career that had once defined him, these all felt like recollections from another life. He stretched out on the mattress. It was firm, unforgiving. The ceiling was cracked above him, slight graffiti, scrawled on it. Names, prayers, curses. He followed the markings with his eyes, trying to imagine who had preceded him here, who had tallied the nights in silence, as he now was. From below the tier there came cries, fights, menaces, the heavy tread of guards cutting through them all. A laugh sounded afterwards, icy and biting, the sort of laugh that informed him that this facility had its own set of rules, and they weren't found in any manual. He shut his eyes, but he didn't sleep. Instead, his brain was filled with flashes. His mother's face inside the courtroom, that silver cross white-knuckled in her fist, the the motion of her lips during prayer. He could still envision the tears streaming down her face. He ground his teeth together and swallowed hard. Stay strong, she had instructed him. But strength was a luxury here. Survival in this place wasn't. About strength. It was about endurance. About when to fight and when to remain quiet. A voice pierced the darkness, ringing from the cell next door. "Yo, Combs! Welcome to the jungle!" Laughter ensued. It wasn't pleasant. It was a warning. Diddy's eyes opened, gazing at the ceiling. His jaw clenched. His heart thrashed. This wasn't the stage. This wasn't the courtroom. This was a new world with new rules. And as the first night wore on, one thing became obvious. 17 years wasn't just a sentence. It was a battlefield. Morning arrived cruel. Not warmth, not sunlight. Only the cacophonous shriek of a siren and the clang of doors being slammed open one after another. Metal on metal, ringing down the tier like dominoes. Diddy sat up, his back rigid from the thin mattress, his eyes irritated from a night of no sleep. Guards barked commands down the hallway. Inmates moved out of cells, the shuffle of boots and chains becoming a chorus of movement. "Combs, move out!" a guard snapped, slamming the bars. He straightened, tugging himself together, shoulders back through his gut knotted. The cuffs locked around his wrists once more. Cold, indifferent. The door to the cell creaked open, and he stepped into the hallway, surrounded by gazes. Each head swiveled as he walked by. Whispers tagged along behind him. That's him. 17. Years. Money won't save you here. The cafeteria was a tempest of sound, trays crashing, voices yelling, chairs scraping against the concrete floor. Burnt coffee and overcooked oatmeal lingered in the air. Diddy took his tray, walked down the line, and sat alone at an empty table. Quiet formed around him. No one sat near. No one addressed him. Celebrity had rendered him untouchable on the outside. Here, it just made him target practice. It didn't take long. A band of men walked in, striding with the ease of men who owned the place. Tattoos etched into their skin, eyes hard, smirks cold. Their big one, tall and wide-shouldered, clanged his tray down in front of Diddy's table. Well, the man said, bending forward. "Look who we got, Mr. Big Time." Diddy didn't reply. His hands gripped his fork harder. The man sneered, scanning the room for an audience. 17 years, huh? Bet you think you're still in charge. But out here, you ain't nobody. A shiver of laughter ran through the room. Everyone was staring at them now. Diddy remained motionless, his jaw clenched, his heart thumping in his chest like a drum. He knew the trick. They wanted a reaction. Anger, fear, something to break through the surface. The man inched forward, his breath warm, his voice cutting. "So what's it gonna be, superstar? You gonna pay your way out of this? Or you gonna learn how things work in here?" For an instant, time hung suspended. The clatter of the cafeteria receded, and Diddy could hear only the pounding of blood in his ears. He remembered the courtroom, his mother's prayer, the judge's gavel coming down. 17 years. He let his breath out slowly, prying his hands open. "No jumping up, no weakness. I ain't here to play," Diddy repeated, his tone low but firm. "And I ain't here to bow." The grin on the man's face disappeared. The table fell quiet. For a moment, the energy hung like a live wire. Then the leader laughed, backing away. "All right," he grumbled. "We'll see." The crew strode off, laughter echoing after them, but the message was unmistakable. It wasn't over yet. It was just the start. Diddy sat frozen, his tray still, the burden of every glare weighing him down. His first run-in hadn't left blood, but it had branded his back with a target. 17 years, and the war had started already. The days ran together fast. Mornings began with steel doors slamming open. Nights finished with the same noise shutting them behind. Time didn't progress here. It cycled, always looping, each day the same as the one before. But within that uniformity, Diddy came to notice the rules, the true rules. Rule 1, don't display weakness. Eyes were constantly on you. Each flinch, each hesitation, each crack in the armor, they saw it. And when they did, they pushed harder. Rule 2, select silence carefully. In here, words had power. A haphazard comment could initiate a brawl. A thoughtless comment could label you for years. Sometimes survival was about keeping your mouth closed, even when your pride cried out otherwise. Rule 3, don't cross the lines. Each table in the cafeteria, each corner in the yard, each telephone on the wall, these were taken by someone. Cross the wrong line, and you paid in blood. He learned through observation, listening, sitting by himself at first, then gradually, with caution, finding his ground. Not friends, He wasn't naive enough to refer to them that way, but nods of understanding, sharing of room, unspoken covenants, little things that kept him alive another day. At night, however, when the cell door shut and the din of the prison faded, the burden reasserted itself. The quiet overwhelmed him, more oppressive than the bars. 17 years. He would lie on the thin mattress, his eyes fixed on the cracks in the ceiling, his mind wandering to the world beyond, the flashing, lights, the sounds, the life that had characterized him. But those were phantoms now, dissipating a little more each day. A night, while the block settled into restless silence, a voice hollered from the bottom of the tier. "Combs!" He didn't reply. 17 years, huh? Bet you won't last 17 days. Guffaws rang, reflecting off the concrete walls. Diddy slowly came up, looking at the bars, his fists balled. He didn't shout back. He didn't stand. He just whispered to himself, so quietly only he heard, "I'll last 17 lifetimes if I have to." The words weren't a promise to anyone. They were a defense, a reminder, a promise to survive. For because here, survival hadn't been dependent on power, wealth, or reputation. Survival had been about not breaking. And as the lights went out, the prison descending into fitful sleep, one fact seared in his chest like fire. They might imprison him. They might take away his name, his freedom, his world. But they would never steal his will to survive. 17 years, and the fight had only just started. The battle was brief. Nothing in prison ever lasted for long. It had begun in the yard, a push, a too harsh word, a challenge that could not be shrugged off. Fists flew through the air, boots scraped on the broken concrete, voices swelled in a riot of mayhem. Then the guards mobbed, sirens wailed, shouts pierced the moment, arms wrenched behind his back, face smashed into the ground, dirt and iron taste in his mouth. And like that, it was over. Blood trickled from his lip as they hauled him back across the block, every pair of eyes upon him, some wide with shock, others narrow-eyed with calculation. By the time the cell door slammed shut, quiet closed in once more. His knuckles stung, his ribs throbbed, but deep within him, something else seethed hotter, determination. The battle hadn't been about victory, it had been about making a point. I won't back down. Hours later, perched on the edge of his bunk, the block still vibrating with the spectacle, a voice wafted through the bars. "You stood your ground." Diddy glanced up. Over the tier, a figure slumped in the darkness, eyes firm, tone low. Not scornful, not aggressive, just watching. "Most collapsed their first week," the man told him. "You didn't. That says something." He did not respond. Simply wiped blood from his lip, gritting his teeth. But the words stayed with him. That evening, for the first time since the gavel came down, the quiet wasn't so overwhelming. He'd been targeted from the moment he walked through the doors, but after the fight the lines got blurred. Some still regarded him as prey. Others, perhaps something more. The scars would heal, but the message would endure. And reputation was survival behind bars. 17 years. And now, he wasn't just some prisoner. He was in the game. The cell still reeked of sweat and blood. His own knuckles were open, red lines coursing down his fingers, but he didn't mind. Pain was fleeting. The message had been permanent. Prison wasn't about the guy who threw the hardest punch. It was about the guy who didn't flinch, who didn't look away, who didn't break when the pressure of all the stairs weighed down on him. And tonight, all the men in that block had witnessed him hold his ground. Whispers spread more quickly than the guards could bolt the doors. Some joked about it, telling him he got lucky. Some honored it, nodding somberly, recognizing that at least he did not fold. Others, the sinister ones, said nothing. They simply observed, wordless, calculating. That was worse than any threat. He reclined on the thin mattress, gazing up at the ceiling, and his ribs hurt whenever he breathed. The quiet between the breaths was oppressive, with thoughts that weren't spoken, with recollections of the life outside, the stage lights, the music, the millions of eyes that had once shouted his name. Out there, he had been invincible. In here, he was another body in a cage. But this evening, that body had fought. A voice in the distance echoed through the bars and concrete. "Respect is earned different ways in here, superstar. You bleed for it, or you buy it. It looks like." You decided on the first one. No name, no face, only a voice, a specter in the dark. But the words strike home. He shut his eyes, allowing the pain to seep into his bones, allowing the fatigue at last to overcome him. When the morning arrived, the world hadn't changed. The sirens were still blaring. The guards were still barking. The acrid smell of burnt Coffee and bleach was still hanging in the air, but when he entered the yard, eyes moved differently. Not pity, not mockery, watchfulness, measuring, testing. He wasn't safe, not by a long shot, but he wasn't invisible anymore. The guy he had fought against leaned against the fence, bruised and swollen, scowling at him with a venom that threatened it wasn't over. A wordless promise passed between them. This wasn't done. Prison fights were not isolated battles. They were wars fought in pieces, each fight building toward something larger, bloodier, more conclusive. But another man, older, skin worn, tattoos faded by age, moved into his way. He didn't smile, didn't menace, just stared him in the face and said, "You're learning. Remember this. Here, you don't make it on your own. You join a circle, or a circle will join you." And then he departed. The words lodged like a blade. All day they repeated themselves. Alone meant weak. Weak meant prey. Prey meant gone. In the cafeteria, he ate at a table once more. This time a young inmate pushed his tray down 2 places away. Not close, not friendly, but not hostile either. Just close enough to send a message. Little things, gentle things. Alliances didn't begin with handshakes in prison. They began with silence, with distance, with shared air that didn't lead to violence. That evening, he went back to his cell and gazed at the graffiti inscribed upon the walls by men long deceased. Prayers, names, curses. He could not help but think how many of them had lived, how many had walked out, how many had departed in body bags. 17 years. He whispered it to himself again, but this time it didn't sound like a curse. It sounded like a sentence he had no choice but to serve, one day at a time. The guards rounded. The block quieted into restless stillness. Somewhere along the tier, laughter echoed. High, hard, the kind that always signaled trouble. Somewhere else a man muttered a prayer, words barely spoken but persistent, unyielding, as though he was attempting to cling to his soul through the concrete. Diddy rolled over, hands propped behind his head, eyes fully open. Slumber wouldn't arrive. Not this night. Not following the fight. Not following the threats. His body cried out for rest, but his mind wouldn't permit it. Because here, sleep wasn't safe. Sleep equaled exposing yourself. Sleep equaled not hearing the footsteps approaching. The battle hadn't been just about fists. It had been about survival. About showing that even with all the money he'd ever made, no matter how much fame had trailed behind his name, in here, without all of it, he could still hold his own. And tomorrow? Tomorrow would be the next challenge. 17 years of them. He tightened his fists, wincing with the agony of split skin, the ache of bruised bones. He reveled in the pain, because pain ensured he was still here, and being here was all that mattered now.